We expected to immediately choose a government which would make sure that every Ukrainian led a happier life. At the moment, the government does not fully understand what the concept of happiness means for individual Ukrainians. We thought that people would come in, people who had absolutely no connection to other structures. Our Ukrainian, I'm not talking about abroad right now, people who did not own a business, who had no personal interests, would only be working on this, would only work for the benefit of Ukraine. At the same time, we expected them to be fantastically qualified, that they would come forward immediately, that all our wishes would instantly come true. Well, that most likely would not happen. Let's not forget that Crimea and Donbass also happened here. No one expected that. Everyone knew that there would be some tension within society. But they did not expect that we would have to relocate 1.5 million people, find refuge for them, find work for them, that it would all depend on the budget because there is no other source. And that we would have to rearm the army, and with that comes huge cost. That there would be support from Europe, but not how we expected it. And that no one would work for us, that no one would carry out the program which would need to carry out, especially in the fight against corruption and everyone abiding by the law. Everyone thought that we were behaving properly, like classical Europeans. We don't litter, we pay our taxes, we fulfill all our duties. I emphasize that this was everyone, and the government would also do all of this. It didn't happen the first time, or the second time, and, of course, there is disappointment. But this situation is typical. People expect a lot from the government, after and during the elections. Afterwards, there's a certain amount of disappointment, because the government is what it is. It's like this in every country, and we are not to blame for this. I like the fact that people are relying less on the government and more on themselves again. This is the only thing that will help us out of the quagmire we've ended up in. When we look at the sociological surveys, in 2016 a lot of people thought things that depended more on external circumstances and less on the person themselves. It was very positive in this sense in 2014-2015. There are two curves in Ukraine. The top one is people who think that an overwhelming part of life depends on external circumstances. And the bottom one is the people who are certain that this depends on their own behavior. And if we talk about the beginning of the study, this was still the 1990s. At first, the difference was just huge. It has gradually decreased. Then it started to rise again. In 2014-2015 it was minimal, but last year it began to increase again. The government did not meet the expectations placed upon it. In fact, we often place the expectations on the government, which it can't fulfill. At the time, I was impressed by Havel's address to Yushchenko during the first Maidan revolution. This was an open address on television. He said, "Mr. Yushchenko, now you will have to solve the most difficult problem. The power of expectation is very high, and you have to somehow hold it back, meet the expectations, and this is practically impossible." This came from Havel, who had been through all of this, who had been in the same situation. They believed in him like a messiah, but then the situation deteriorated significantly. One of the well-known political figures, Churchill perhaps, said that when people choose bread over dignity, in the end, they will have neither bread nor dignity. We often hear that in order to maintain democracy and freedom, we need to make certain concessions, ban this, press on with that, make cuts here. A certain part of society think that and agree with that when the interests of the state are higher than the interests of the citizens. And because of this idea that there is a certain divide within society, some criticize others. But this is just inevitable in any society. Only in totalitarian societies is there no diversity in thought, discussions and other positions. Some people think that the most important thing is safety from all future disasters. But it needs to be explained to them that if we don't defend our society's independence today, then we will not be able to solve ourselves tomorrow. I think that the gap is between those who want change and those who are afraid of it. Those who want change are prepared to make compromises, even in material sense. They understand that this is necessary. They want to direct their own efforts towards this. But those who don't want change just expect a positive trajectory of development, but they don't think about ways to ensure this. There are undoubtedly more people who do not want change. That's always been the case. And it's not just older people. There are a lot of people like this who are, let's say, 40 years old. They want to work, earn money, but they don't think about what needs to change within society. They want to keep the old rules of the game. So they know that when they go to the doctors, they can take their problem to the doctor, And in turn, the doctor will do whatever they have to do. They don't want to find out what would happen with the new medication. They don't want to think about new schools. They don't want to choose. I think that decentralization is a consequence of the emergence of Ukrainian civil society. Decentralization does not really need central government. What do we do with the money, with the responsibility? Let it all be concentrated in one place. It's simpler that way. It's already understood that society does not want that. So they've decided on decentralization. Now we have to reap the benefits from decentralization, the direct benefits. And we could have that if, let's say, we don't build fountains in every village, but build the things we really need. And what do we really need? We need a medical center. We need to get to know one another. In all the polls, without exception, people say that Donbass worries them above all else. People who do not live there worry that their relatives will be mobilized. They are afraid. And that is a normal reaction. Every mother wants their son to live. The closer people are to the anti-terrorist operation zone, the stronger the opposition, and that is also understandable. There has never been a peaceful resolution to a situation like this virtually anywhere in the world. I am convinced that if Russia's position were different, then the situation would have turned out differently. But there are already too many people involved in these relationships, and it's too difficult to move forward because of their convictions. Besides, a lot of blood has already been spilled. A lot of people think that the local residents are to blame for the events in Donbass. And there are many who say, sorry, we did everything we could, but they did not help. Instead, the local authorities blocked us, they expelled us, and they beat us. And that is also true. I am absolutely convinced that it will be 10 years before the military conflict ends and blood ceases to be spilled. For there to be a resolution, there needs to be understanding above all else. We don't want to listen to one another right now, but we must do this. We live in one country. It's the attempts to impose their own supremacy that concern me the most.